Close your eyes, take a slow breath in, and let it out. There is a city I want to take you to tonight. A city that no longer exists exactly as it was. A city that lives now only in the memories of those who walked its streets, who breathed its air, who fell asleep to the sound of fountains in walled courtyards, and woke to the smell of fresh bread drifting through open windows in the pale hours before dawn. The city is Tehran. The year is 1973. And the story I am going to tell you tonight is not the story you have heard before. It is not the story of kings or revolutions or the clash of great powers. Those stories have been told. Those stories are loud and full of fire, and they belong to the daylight hours when the world is awake and restless. This story belongs to the night. This is the story of ordinary people, of a family living in a house on a quiet street in the northern part of the city, where the air smells faintly of jasmine in summer and wood smoke in winter, and where the Alborz mountains rise so close to the rooftops that on clear mornings you can see the snow on their peaks from the kitchen window while the tea is brewing. This is the story of Mariam. She is 31 years old. She has dark hair that she pins up each morning with 2 tortoise-shell clips. She has a husband named Dariush, who works at the Ministry of Culture, and a daughter named Shirin, who is 7 and believes that the family cat, a grey and white Tom named Behruz, can understand Farsi. She has a mother-in-law named Kanom Sadeghi, who comes every Friday and brings a pot of gourmet sabzi wrapped in cloth, and who has never, in 11 years, acknowledged that Mariam's own cooking is anything but adequate. Mariam has a life. It is a quiet life, a life of small rituals and daily textures, a life threaded through with beauty and frustration and love in equal measure, a life very much like yours in all the ways that matter most. Tonight, we are going to live that life with her. We are going to walk the streets of Tehran in the years when the city was still half ancient and half modern, when donkey carts and Mercedes-Benz automobiles shared the same roads, when the bazaar still smelled of saffron and rosewater and old wool, and when the mountains watched over everything with the same patient silence they have kept for 10,000 years. Let your body sink into the surface beneath you. Feel the weight of your arms. Feel the weight of your legs. Let your shoulders drop just a little more. We are going now, slowly, gently, to a world that was beautiful and complicated and fully, completely alive. Come with me. Chapter 1. The morning the city woke up. It begins, as all days in Tehran begin, with the call to prayer. It rises from the minarets in the grey-blue hour before sunrise, winding through the narrow streets of the old quarters, climbing the hills toward the newer neighborhoods in the north, finding every window, every sleeping ear, every dreaming mind in the city of 4 million souls. Mariam hears it without waking. She has heard it every morning of her life since she was a small girl in Tabriz, where the accent of the muezzin was different, more nasal, more drawn out. The vowels of Arabic stretched across the cold mountain air, like cloth on a drying line. In Tehran, the voice is different, sharper, more urban, but the effect is the same. It enters her sleep and becomes part of whatever she is dreaming, and she turns in the warmth of the blanket and does not open her eyes. Beside her, Dariush does not stir either. He works late on Tuesdays and comes home smelling of cigarette smoke and the particular dry paper smell of government offices. And on Wednesday mornings, he sleeps until 7, sometimes 7:30, his face turned toward the wall, one arm thrown over his head with the abandon of a man who has earned his rest. Mariam loves him most at 7 in the morning. She loves him in a way she cannot always access at other hours, when he is talking too loudly on the telephone, or arguing with his brother about money, or sitting at the dinner table distracted by something she cannot name and he will not explain. But at 7 in the morning, in the pale grey light coming through the curtains, with his face relaxed and his breathing slow and even, he looks like the man she married. He looks like the man who once drove her all the way to the Caspian Sea in a borrowed car just because she had said, offhandedly, that she had never seen the sea at sunrise. She lies there for a moment, watching him breathe. Then Shirin calls out from the next room. Not a cry, not a shout, just a sound, a single syllable, half word, half groan. The sound of a child surfacing from sleep, like a small animal climbing out of warm water. Mariam is up before the syllable finishes. This is motherhood. This is the particular alertness that replaces deep sleep sometime in the first year of a child's life and never entirely goes away. A readiness that lives in the body like a held breath, ready at any moment to become movement. She pulls on her housecoat. It is hanging on the hook behind the door, soft blue cotton, worn thin at the elbows, and goes into the hallway. The house is still dim. The tiles in the hallway are cold beneath her feet. She makes a note, not for the first time, to buy another small rug for this stretch of corridor. And she knows, also not for the first time, that she will probably not get around to it until winter. Shirin's door is ajar. Mariam pushes it open with 2 fingers. Her daughter is sitting up in bed, her dark hair a magnificent chaos around her head, her eyes not yet fully open, one hand reaching automatically for the stuffed rabbit that lives on her pillow. The rabbit's name is Amir, and he has been washed so many times that he is now more grey than white, and one of his button eyes has been replaced with a slightly larger button of a different shade of black, so that he has the permanent expression of a rabbit who has seen something mildly surprising. "Good morning, little one," Mariam says. Shirin looks at her, then looks at Amir, then looks at the window. "Is it today?" she asks. Mariam remembers. The school trip, the trip to the Golistan Palace. "Yes," she says, "it is today." And just like that, Shirin is out of bed, the rabbit clutched to her chest, her feet barely touching the floor as she moves with the particular velocity of a 7-year-old who has somewhere to be. Mariam stands in the doorway for a moment, watching her daughter disappear into the bathroom. She can hear the water running. She can hear Shirin talking to Amir, explaining to him, apparently, where they are going and why he cannot come. She smiles. She goes to the kitchen. The kitchen in the house on Vali Asa Street is Mariam's domain in the way that a painter's studio is the painter's domain. It is where she thinks. It is where she works out the problems of her day before her day has properly started. It is where she stands at the window over the sink and looks out at the small courtyard, the square of it, the pomegranate tree in the corner, the fountain that does not work properly since last spring, and lets her mind settle. She fills the kettle. She sets it on the gas ring. She takes down the tea caddy from the second shelf, the blue and white one with the hunting scene on it that she bought at the bazaar 3 years ago, slightly chipped on one side but still beautiful. She measures the tea. Loose leaf, dark, the kind that brews the color of old amber. She puts it in the small pot, the good one, the one with the gold rim that was a wedding gift from her aunt in Mashhad. While the water heats, she cuts bread. The bread came this morning, as it comes every morning, from the bakery 2 streets away. Dariush collects it on his way back from his early walk. He has taken a short walk every morning since his doctor told him 2 years ago that his blood pressure was something to think about, and he has taken this instruction and made it into a ritual that he protects fiercely. He walks to the end of Vali Asa, turns left, goes down to the small square with the old plane trees, sits for 5 minutes on the stone bench, then returns. On the way back, he stops at the bakery. The bread is called sangak. It is long and flat and dimpled, baked on hot pebbles in a clay oven, slightly scorched on the bottom and dusted with sesame seeds. It tears rather than cuts, the crust crackling in a way that releases a smell, yeast and char, and something deeply, ancestrally comforting that Mariam cannot imagine living without. She tears 2 pieces. She takes the butter from the refrigerator. She takes the jar of quince jam that Kanom Sadeghi brought last month, made from quinces from her sister's garden in Karaj. It is the color of amber. It trembles slightly when she scoops it with a spoon. She lays out the breakfast things. She does this with care, not because anyone will notice, but because she notices, because the arrangement of a cup, a small plate, a folded piece of bread on a cloth has a rightness to it when it is done properly. And that rightness is a kind of satisfaction available even in the ordinary hours of an ordinary morning. Dariush appears in the doorway at 7:10, his hair flat on one side, his eyes only half open, wearing the grey sweater with a small hole in the cuff that she has been meaning to mend since February. "You're up early," he says. "Shirin's trip," Mariam says. He nods. He comes to the table. He sits down heavily in the way of a man whose relationship with mornings is one of reluctant compromise. He takes the tea she pours for him, wraps both hands around the glass, and looks out the window at the courtyard. "The pomegranate tree is beginning to bud," he says. Mariam looks. He is right. Small, tight, red-tipped buds, like fists not yet opened. "I should water it today," she says. He nods again. He takes a sip of tea. He tears a piece of bread. There are days in every marriage, long days, years of days, where everything that is said is practical and logistical and surface level, and yet underneath all of it, there is something warm and load-bearing and real. This morning is one of those mornings. The words are about pomegranate trees and watering, but the warmth running beneath them is something older and more durable than conversation. Shirin arrives at the table in a state of high excitement. She is wearing her school uniform, dark blue skirt, white shirt. But she has added to this outfit a headband with a small plastic flower on it, which Mariam notes but does not address, because some mornings the balance between what matters and what can wait is worth calculating carefully. "I told Amir everything," Shirin announces, taking her seat. "He wants to come." "I know he does," Mariam says, "but rabbits are not allowed at the Golistan Palace. It is a rule." Who made that rule? The Shah, Dariush says, without looking up from his bread. Shirin considers this. She appears to find it plausible. She reaches for the jam. They eat. Outside, the city is waking up. The sound of it comes through the window, gradually increasing, layering itself. A car horn somewhere on the next street. The distant rumble of a bus on the main road. The voice of the vegetable seller who comes through the neighborhood on a cart every morning, calling out his wares in a sing-song that is half announcement, half poetry. Sabzijat, he calls. Sabzijat, taze, taze. Fresh vegetables. Fresh, fresh. Mariam hears him and makes a mental note. She needs tomatoes today. She needs onions. If he has good herbs, she will buy them too. Tarragon, perhaps, and some fenugreek, because she is planning to make ash-e-reshte this weekend, the thick herb and noodle soup that her mother used to make on the first cold days of autumn. And she wants everything to be ready. She will go out after she drops Shirin at school. She begins to plan the morning in her head. Shirin to school by 8:15. The vegetable seller on the way back. Then she needs to go to the dry goods shop on the dairy street because she is running low on rice and dried lentils. Then home. Then the laundry, which has been waiting since yesterday in a basket beside the washing machine with the reproachful patience of laundry everywhere. Then she will sit for 30 minutes and read. She has been reading a novel. It is by a woman writer, a young woman, barely older than herself, who has written a story set in a village in Azerbaijan about 3 generations of women and the things they pass between them without speaking. Mariam has been reading it slowly, deliberately, the way she eats food she wants to last. 20 or 30 pages a day. She is 3/4 through it, and she has begun to feel a particular mix of anticipation and regret that comes near the end of a good book. The hunger to know what happens, and the sorrow that knowing will mean it is over. She is looking forward to those 30 minutes all day, even though the day has barely started. Dariush finishes his tea, thanks her, and goes to get dressed. Shirin finishes her bread and jam and asks if she can have a small piece of the sesame candy that lives in the tin above the refrigerator. No, Mariam says. Not before school. But Baba always lets me, Shirin says. Mariam looks at her daughter with the calm expression of a woman who knows perfectly well that this is both true and irrelevant. Your father, she says, is not in charge of your teeth. Shirin absorbs this. She seems to find it a reasonable argument. She picks up Amir from where she has placed him on the table beside her plate, a placement Mariam has also noted but not addressed, and goes to brush her teeth. Mariam clears the breakfast things. She washes up. The water from the tap runs cold at first, then warm. She watches the suds dissolve in the sink. She stacks the clean glasses on the draining board, each one placed carefully so it will not chip. Outside, the city continues its gradual awakening, and in the house on Vali Asa Street, morning moves at its own unhurried pace, like water finding the shape of the vessel it inhabits, filling all the small spaces, all the ordinary corners, all the quiet hours that make up a life. Chapter 2. The city itself. Let me tell you about Tehran in the 1970s. Because you need to see it. You need to understand the texture of it, the contradictions of it, the way it existed in 2 centuries at once. The ancient and the modern pressed so close together that sometimes You could not tell where one ended and the other began. Tehran in 1973 is a city of somewhere between 4 and 5 million people, depending on who is counting and how. It has been growing for decades, swallowing the villages that used to surround it, extending its edges further and further toward the mountains in the north and the desert flatlands in the south. It is not a beautiful city in the way that Isfahan is beautiful, or Shiraz, with its gardens and its poetry and its slow, self-conscious grace. Tehran is a newer city, rougher-edged, hungrier, louder. It has wide boulevards built in the French style, lined with plane trees whose roots are breaking the pavement. It has roundabouts choked with traffic. It has apartment blocks that went up in the 1960s in a hurry, their concrete already stained by pollution and weather. It has mosques and cinemas and tea houses and banks and government ministries and bazaars and parks and palaces. And all of these things exist within walking distance of each other in a way that requires constant negotiation of scale and meaning. And yet, there is something about the city that gets into you. There is the light, for one thing. The particular quality of the light in Tehran, especially in the mornings and the late afternoons, when the sun comes in at an angle and hits the mountains and the city simultaneously, and everything turns briefly golden and slightly unreal, the way places look in dreams or in memories of places you loved. There is the smell of the city. Old cities have their own smells, layered and complex, and Tehran is no exception. In the bazaar, in the covered passageways where merchants have sold their goods for centuries, the air holds spices and metal and leather and sweat and something ancient underneath it all. The smell of accumulated transaction, of 10,000 years of people giving and taking and making do. In the northern neighborhoods, the residential streets smell of earth and flowering trees in spring, of coal smoke in winter, of cooking that drifts from windows in the early evenings and mingles into something collective and deeply human. Cumin and dried limes and garlic and the sweetness of slow-cooked onions caramelizing in oil. There are the sounds. Tehran in 1973 is not a quiet city. It has never been a quiet city. Traffic is constant and without mercy. Drivers use their horns as a primary communication device, not in anger necessarily, but as information, as greeting, as warning, as punctuation. The streets are full of voices. The street vendors call out. The radio bleeds from shop doorways. On Fridays, the mosques fill, and the sound of prayer expands into the air over the rooftops, and something in the city slows and deepens, briefly, like a breath held and then released. And yet, beneath all the noise, if you are attentive, there are pockets of extraordinary stillness. In the courtyards of old houses, behind high walls, time moves differently. The fountain makes its sound. The pomegranate tree stands in its corner. A cat sleeps on a warm stone. The noise of the street is present but muffled, like a river heard from a room above. In the bazaar's tea shops, men sit for hours over small glasses of tea, unhurried, their conversation low and unhurried, the afternoon light making rectangles on the tiled floor. In the parks, old men play backgammon. Children run between the plane trees. Women sit on the benches and watch or talk, or simply sit, their hands folded, their faces turned toward the sky. This is the city Mariam moves through every day. She knows it the way you know a place you have lived in long enough for it to become part of your body. not as a map or a list of landmarks, but as a felt thing, a physical knowledge of distances and rhythms, and the particular quality of different streets at different times of day. She knows which baker makes the best bread and which one makes the most of it, talking the price up. She knows that the shortcut through the alley behind the electrical supply shop is 10 minutes faster, but smells bad in summer. She knows that the woman at the cloth stall in the bazaar will give her a better price if she pretends to leave. She knows that the fountain in the square near Shirin School has a loose tile that trips people and has been waiting to be repaired for 3 years. She knows the city the way women know cities, from the inside, in detail, on foot, through daily use. And tonight, as you drift towards sleep, I want to take you through it with her. Let your eyes close a little more. Let your breathing slow. We are going to walk through Tehran together, slowly, taking our time. Chapter 3. The Bazaar. 3 days a week. Sunday, Tuesday, Thursday. Mariam goes to the bazaar. Not the Grand Bazaar, which is enormous and slightly overwhelming. Its covered streets stretching for kilometers. Its sections divided by trade. The coppersmiths here, the carpet merchants there, the goldsmiths in the glittering hall, where the light catches every surface and turns the air to something that looks like it should make a sound. The Grand Bazaar is for larger purchases, for fabric buying and carpet looking, and the kind of serious commerce that requires a full morning and sensible shoes. The bazaar she goes to on ordinary days is a smaller affair. A neighborhood market, an open-air arrangement of stalls along 2 streets that the city has gradually enclosed with awnings and half-roof structures until it has the feeling, if not quite the architecture, of a covered market. She goes on Sunday morning, after dropping Shirin at school. She carries her shopping bag. It is made of woven cotton, deep blue and red, bought at this same market 4 years ago from a woman who wove them herself and sold them from a blanket on the ground, and who Mariam has not seen since, and thinks of occasionally with the mild, helpless regret one feels for things that have passed without announcement. The market is already busy when she arrives at 8:30. She enters from the south end, where the bread sellers are, not the bakery bread. This is different, an older kind, made in the traditional way, baked on a convex iron griddle over an open flame, thin and slightly charred at the edges, and absolutely delicious, eaten hot with a pinch of salt. An old man tends the griddle. He has been tending it, based on the evidence of his face, for approximately 60 years. He works without looking, his hands moving with the automatic confidence of a body that has done this so many times it no longer requires instruction from the mind. He turns the bread with his bare hands, briefly, touching the hot surface for just a fraction of a second at a time, his skin evidently having developed over decades a tolerance for temperature that would be extraordinary in anyone else. Mariam buys 2 breads from him. She pays him. He takes her money. He does not smile. He does not look at her. He turns his bread. This is not rudeness. This is the particular dignity of a man completely absorbed in his work, a man for whom the work is the whole of the present moment, and who has no energy left over for social performance. She moves on. The vegetable section is next, and this is where Mariam spends the most time and makes the most decisions. She moves slowly along the rows of stalls, appraising. The tomatoes here are beautiful today. She picks one up, holds it, feels its weight, presses it very slightly with her thumb to test its give. It is firm, but not hard. It is the deep red of late summer. She can already smell it. That particular acidic sweet smell of a ripe tomato. That is one of the most precisely evocative smells in the world. The smell of something about to become delicious. How much? She asks. The seller tells her. She makes the face. Every woman who has ever bought vegetables knows the face. It is not a face of offense. It is not a face of refusal. It is a face of patient, composed skepticism. The face of a person who has heard this price and is allowing the seller a moment to reconsider. The seller drops the price by 10%. She buys a kilo. Then herbs. She is pleased to find a stall with good fresh herbs today. She buys tarragon, flat-leaf parsley, fenugreek, coriander. The herbs are tied in small bundles with cotton string, and she unties each bundle and runs it through her fingers, smelling her hands afterward. An accumulation of green, slightly medicinal, slightly sweet. The smell of Persian cooking in compressed form. She buys walnuts from a man who sells them from a large metal bowl, scooping them with a tin cup. She buys dried barberries, zereshk, tiny and tart, the kind she uses in the rice dish she makes on Fridays, the one Dariush calls the best thing she makes, which is not quite true, but is the kind of claim a man makes when he wants to secure a reliable future supply of something. She buys a small jar of grape molasses from a woman who makes it herself, thick and dark and sweet, for spreading on bread or stirring into stews. She moves through the market the way water moves through a landscape, following the easiest path, responsive to what she finds, unhurried, purposeful in a loose and flexible way. She stops at a stall selling dried flowers. She does not need dried flowers. She knows she does not need dried flowers. But she stands for a moment and looks at them anyway. Rose petals, dried and darkened to the color of old wine. Lavender, still holding its color. Paler in death than in life, but still unmistakably itself. Chamomile, small yellow buttons on thin dried stems, smelling of hay and something clean. She buys a small bag of rose petals. She will use them, she tells herself, for tea. She will make rose petal tea on a cold afternoon, the way her grandmother used to make it, measuring the petals with ceremony into the pot, adding water just off the boil, waiting, pouring it through a strainer into a small glass cup, adding a single cube of sugar. This is true. She will do this. But it is also true that she bought the rose petals because they were beautiful, and because sometimes beauty is sufficient reason to buy something, and because for less than the cost of a small newspaper, she has added a sensory pleasure to her afternoon that would otherwise not have existed. This is a kind of economy that the books do not account for, but that is nonetheless real. She buys the rose petals. She continues through the market. At the edge of the food section, she stops at a stall selling household goods, cheap items, plastic bowls, wooden spoons, clothespins, small hinges and hooks, buttons, elastic, safety pins. She buys a packet of safety pins because she is always running out of them and finding their absence inconvenient at precisely the moments she can least afford inconvenience. She buys a wooden spoon because the handle on one of her current wooden spoons has developed a crack that she keeps meaning to do something about and keeps not doing something about. And buying a new one is faster and cheaper than finding the glue and remembering to use it. She pays. She moves on. She passes through the cloth section without stopping, though she slows slightly at a stall with new cotton fabric in a dark green the color of pine needles, which she thinks would make a good tablecloth, but decides not to think too hard about because she does not have time to sew a tablecloth at the moment, and wanting things you cannot immediately have is, in her experience, a low-grade form of suffering, best not cultivated unnecessarily. She exits the market from the north end, which brings her out onto a side street 2 blocks from the small square with the old plane trees. She walks through the square. The old men are already there, though it is barely 9 o'clock. 3 of them at a small metal table under the largest plane tree. A backgammon board between them. One of them is playing. 2 of them are watching and offering advice in the tones of men who are quite certain their advice is going unheeded, but feel it important to continue offering it anyway. A small boy chases a pigeon. The pigeon declines to be caught. A woman Mariam does not know walks past carrying a basket of laundry. Mariam walks through the square, her shopping bag on her arm, full and heavy and good. She turns onto Valley Asa Street. She can already smell the jasmine from the garden 3 houses from the corner, which blooms early and extravagantly and fills the whole street with its smell in the mornings. And she takes a breath of it as she passes, because jasmine in the morning is not nothing. Jasmine in the morning is one of the things that makes a life feel inhabited, and she believes, without having ever articulated it, that the accumulation of small, noticed pleasures is how a person stays alive to their own life. She turns her key in the lock. She is home. Chapter 4. Afternoons in the house. The house on Valley Asa Street was built in 1948 by a man named Haj Agha Tehrani, who was a cloth merchant and who built the house as if cloth mattered. Everything in it was made with the kind of attention to material and finish that you see in a person whose entire working life has been spent understanding the difference between good fabric and bad fabric, and who cannot enter a space without evaluating the quality of what it is made of. The walls are thick. This matters in Tehran, where the summers are hot and the winters cold, and where a thick wall is a form of climate control available to anyone who thought ahead far enough to build one. In summer, the rooms stay cool well into the afternoon. In winter, they hold the warmth of the brazier for hours after it has been extinguished. The floors in the main rooms are tiled in a geometric pattern, dark blue and white and terracotta, that Mariam has spent 11 years walking on and still finds beautiful. The staircase that leads to the upper floor has a carved wooden railing, slightly dark with age and use, that she runs her hand along every time she goes up or down without thinking about it, the way you touch a familiar thing. The courtyard at the center of the house is the size of a large room. It has the pomegranate tree in the corner and the fountain that does not work properly, and 2 long flower beds along the walls where Mariam has planted roses and lavender and a climbing vine that turns red in autumn. In summer, this courtyard is where the family spends its evenings. Dariush brings out the small table and they eat outside. the evening sky turning from blue to violet to the deep navy of full dark overhead, the temperature dropping slowly and pleasantly as the city exhales the heat of the day. They drink tea, they talk, or they do not talk. Sometimes they sit in comfortable silence, Shirin asleep already, or playing quietly on the far side of the courtyard. And the city's noise is present but distant, and the fountain makes its imperfect sound. It has a slight gurgle, a hiccup in the flow that Mariam keeps planning to have fixed, and the stars appear one by one in the strip of sky above the courtyard walls. But we are here in the afternoon. It is a Thursday afternoon in late September, the year 1974. Mariam has done her errands. The laundry is hanging in the courtyard, where the autumn sun is still strong enough to dry it in a few hours. The shopping is put away. The kitchen is clean. Shirin comes home from school at 2:30, delivered by the school bus that stops at the top of the street. Mariam hears the bus stop. She hears the sound of children released from it. Not a single sound, but a kind of collective sonic event, a brief explosion of voices and movement. She goes to the door. Shirin comes down the street at speed. She's carrying her school bag incorrectly, as always, slung from one shoulder and bouncing against her hip. And she is talking to herself or to Amir, who lives in the outer pocket of the bag on the school days for company. Mariam, she announces, before she has reached the door. We had art today. Mariam steps back to let her in. I know you had art today, she says. You always have art on Thursday. Shirin enters the house, drops her bag by the door with a crash, and holds up both hands, which are covered in blue and green paint. We painted a landscape, she says. I painted the sea. Have you ever seen the sea? Mariam asks. Yes, last year, with Dada. She means Dariush. She means the trip to Ramsar, on the Caspian coast, the summer before last. She remembers it, apparently, with great clarity. You painted the Caspian, Mariam says. I painted the sea, Shirin repeats, with the patience of a child explaining something obvious to an adult who is being deliberately obtuse. They go to the kitchen sink. Shirin holds her hands under the water. The paint dissolves slowly. The water turns green, then blue, then a murky grey. Mariam takes the small brush they use for getting paint out from under fingernails. It lives on the shelf above the kitchen sink, because this is not the first time, and works it gently under Shirin's nails. Tell me about the painting, Mariam says. And Shirin talks. She talks in the way of children who have not yet learned to edit themselves for an audience, which is to say, she talks in long, associative, occasionally contradictory streams, jumping from the painting to the teacher's comments to what Farideh said at lunch, to the fact that the school bus driver was grumpy today, to what she would like to be for Nowruz next spring, to whether or not Amir would like a friend, a question she has been returning to periodically for several months. Mariam listens. This is a skill, genuine listening, the kind that is not just waiting for the other person to finish, is a skill. And Mariam is good at it. She has always been good at it. She listens to Shirin the way she reads, with full attention, tracking the current, noting the interesting eddies, comfortable with the silences between the talking. She dries Shirin's hands with a small towel. She checks the nails, mostly clean. Are you hungry? She asks. Shirin considers this as if it is a philosophical question. Yes, she says, finally. Mariam opens the refrigerator. There is leftover rice from last night and some of the herb frittata she made yesterday. Kuku sabzi, flat and green, packed with herbs. She cuts a piece of the kuku and scoops some rice and puts them on a plate. Shirin sits at the kitchen table, still talking, transitioning now to a description of a disagreement she observed at school between two older girls. A disagreement she has clearly found deeply interesting and is doing her best now to reconstruct with full dramatic fidelity. Mariam pours her a small glass of diluted pomegranate juice, sets it down, sits across from her. And then what happened? She asks. Shirin eats, she talks, she eats some more. The afternoon light comes through the kitchen window at a low angle and catches the dust motes drifting above the table and makes them look briefly as if they are rising rather than falling. Outside, the laundry moves in a small wind. The city makes its sounds. The house holds its warmth. Chapter 5. The women of the neighborhood. There is a group of women in the neighborhood who have known each other for years. Not in the formal way of people who have chosen each other, but in the way that proximity creates. The accidental community of people who share a street, a market, a school gate, a daily rhythm, and who gradually, over time, without formally deciding to, become part of each other's lives. There is Zora, who lives 4 houses down, who is 42 and has 3 sons and a husband, who travels frequently for work and who deals with his absences by being approximately twice as capable as anyone else in every situation. Zore is the person you call when something goes wrong, not because she solves problems. Sometimes she does not solve problems, but because in her presence, problems seem more manageable, more finite, more survivable. There is Nahid, who is 34 and recently moved to the neighborhood from Isfahan, and who carries with her something of the beauty and slowness of that city, its preference for things that take time, its belief in the value of ornament. Nahid speaks slowly. She drinks her tea slowly. She wears beautiful clothes, not expensive necessarily, but chosen with care. And there is something about her unhurried quality that makes people around her feel less rushed. There is Farangis, who is 58 and has lived in this neighborhood since before it was really a neighborhood, when there were still orchards where the apartment buildings are now, and the street she lives on was a dirt track that turned to mud in winter. She remembers the orchards. She mentions them occasionally, not with nostalgia exactly, but with the slightly stern factuality of someone who wants the record kept straight. And there are others. Women Mariam knows by name and greeting and occasional conversation. The mothers of Shirin's classmates, the wives of Dariush's colleagues, the women who appear at the same counter in the dry goods shop and at the same stall in the market, and whose lives run parallel to hers in the way of lines that never intersect but travel the same direction. On certain afternoons, usually Tuesdays or Wednesdays, they gather. This is not a formal arrangement. No one sends invitations. No one keeps a schedule. But there is a loose rotation. This week at Zore's, next week at Nahid's, the week after that at Mariam's or Farangis's, whoever has made something good recently and wants to share it. They drink tea. They eat sweets. Someone always brings something. Zore makes rice cookies, round and crumbling and scented with cardamom. Nahid makes halva, the kind made from flour and butter and saffron, that looks like nothing and tastes like everything. Farangis make something different every time, always from a recipe she declines to share fully, which Mariam suspects is a minor act of power and rather admires. They talk. What do they talk about? They talk about everything. They talk about their children, their worries and their pleasures, the small triumphs and the specific difficulties. They talk about their husbands with a frankness available only in this room, among these women who know each other well enough to be honest and trusted enough to be safe with that honesty. They talk about the neighborhood, who has moved, who is selling, the new building going up on the corner, the man on the next street who has begun keeping chickens illegally, and whether or not this is anyone's business and whose business it might be. They talk about the country. This is done carefully and completely, because in 1974 in Tehran, talking about the country requires a particular kind of care, an awareness of what can be said and what cannot, of who might be listening, of the difference between thinking something and saying it out loud, which is a distinction with consequences that are entirely possible and occasionally severe. But here, in these rooms with these women, the conversation goes to places it cannot go in mixed company or public spaces. Zohre's husband was passed over for a promotion last year, she tells them. And there is a reason, though the reason cannot be named too directly, only circled. He had said something once at a dinner to someone who turned out to be the wrong person to say things to. Nahid's brother in Isfahan has applied to study abroad. The application has been pending for 8 months. Whether it will be approved is uncertain in ways that have nothing to do with his qualifications and everything to do with considerations that exist in the gap between official policy and actual practice. Farangis, who is old enough to have seen the government before the Shah and after the Shah, and to have her own opinions about the difference, which she holds with the discretion of a woman who has learned what discretion costs and is willing to pay it, says nothing directly, but raises an eyebrow at certain moments that communicates more than most speeches. And Mariam listens and contributes and holds the conversation in the way of a woman who understands that some of the most important things in a society are discussed not in parliament or in newspapers, but in rooms like this one, over tea that has been poured and drunk and poured again, in the afternoons when the children are at school and the husbands are at work, and the world outside the window carries on without them. This is not nothing. This is, in fact, a great deal. The talk in these rooms is part of the real history of the country, the part that never gets written down, the part that happens in the registers of ordinary life and ordinary courage, carried in the memory of ordinary women who are not in any history book, but who understood what was happening around them with a clarity and a completeness that the official accounts written later from above often miss entirely. Chapter 6. Evening. The evenings in the house on Vali Asa Street have their own rhythm, distinct from the mornings and the afternoons. Dariush comes home between 6 and 6:30. Mariam hears him before she sees him. The key in the lock, the slight catch the front door makes, where it has swollen slightly in its frame over the years, the sound of shoes on the hallway tiles. "How was your day?" she calls from the kitchen. He appears in the doorway. He looks as he usually looks at this hour, like a man who's been somewhere demanding for 8 hours and has arrived somewhere safe. He loosens his tie. He rubs his face with one hand. "Long," he says. "How was yours?" she tells him. The market, the laundry, Shirin's painted sea. He nods. He listens. He goes to wash his hands. He comes back. They are in the kitchen together, which is when the day's real conversation happens. Mariam cooks or finishes cooking. Dariush stands at the window or sits at the table, and they talk the way people talk at the end of the day, which is a particular kind of talking, less curated than daytime conversation, more honest, more tired, more real. He tells her about the ministry, the meeting that ran too long, the colleague who is difficult and getting more so, the project he is working on. He is involved in a cultural documentation initiative, the cataloguing of folk music from different provinces, which he believes in genuinely, and which is complicated in ways that have to do with both the music and the politics that surround it. Mariam listens and stirs and hands him things to do. "Can you peel those? Can you reach that?" And the kitchen fills with the smell of cooking, and the evening light settles into the blue-grey of dusk. Shirin appears periodically to report on Behruz, who has been involved in some incident in the courtyard that she is still investigating. She is not sure if the incident involves the climbing vine or a bird or both. The evidence is ambiguous. She will report further developments. Dariush, when she has gone, raises his eyebrows at Mariam. She shrugs. "What can you do?" They eat at 7. The 3 of them at the kitchen table, which is also the dining table, which is also the homework table, and the painting table, and the table on which Shirin operates her small veterinary practice on a mere and the other stuffed animals. The food tonight is a lamb stew with plums and walnuts. It has been cooking since the afternoon, and the smell of it has been accumulating in the house for hours, so that by the time it is served, it has the added quality of anticipated pleasure, the satisfaction of a thing that has been promised and is now delivered. Shirin eats with her full attention, which is unusual. She is generally a distractible eater, prone to stopping mid-bite to make an observation about something that has nothing to do with eating. But the plum stew she likes unreservedly, and she eats it with focus. "This is very good," Dariush says. Mariam knows it is. She also knows he says this about most of what she cooks, and she is grateful for this, for the consistency of it, the dependability of being appreciated in the ordinary currency of daily life. They talk, they eat, they finish. Shirin is sent to have her bath, which she undertakes with theatrical reluctance, and then, once in the bath, considerable enthusiasm, the sounds of it involving splashing and singing, and what appears to be a narrative involving the rubber duck and an adventure at sea. Mariam and Dariush wash up together. He washes, she dries. This has been their system for 11 years, with no discussion or negotiation, an arrangement arrived at by habit and compatible temperament. He does not mind hot water on his hands. She finds the drying meditative. When the dishes are done, they go to the sitting room. The sitting room has a low wooden table, 2 sofas, a bookcase that Dariush built himself some years ago from a plan in a magazine. Not quite evenly. One shelf is slightly higher on the left side, but sturdy and full of books that are arranged not alphabetically, but by some system known only to Dariush, and sometimes only dimly to him. There is a television in the corner. Mariam watches it reluctantly. She is aware that it is a luxury, that many people do not have one, and that the programs available, all of them state-managed, all of them curated, have a quality of control. She finds slightly depressing, even when the content is innocuous. She watches the news and sometimes a film on Saturday evenings and occasionally a program about nature that Shirin likes. Dariush reads. He reads everything: history, fiction, poetry, technical manuals. He reads the way some people eat, continuously and without much discrimination, and his relationship with books is physical. He underlines things, writes in the margins, dog-ears pages, treats books as working documents rather than sacred objects, which occasionally horrifies Mariam, who was taught that books are to be handled with care, and who finds his scribbling in margins slightly transgressive, in a way she has never quite gotten over. Tonight, he is reading a collection of poems by Fora Farrokhzad. Mariam knows the poems. She has known them for years, since she was at university in Tabriz, where she studied Persian literature and where the poems passed between women students in a way that felt slightly illicit, not because they were banned, but because they were honest about things that women were not supposed to be honest about. And the honesty of them was a kind of radical act that felt dangerous in the most exciting possible way. She glances at him reading them and feels something she has no name for exactly, something warm and slightly complicated. She picks up her own book. She reads. Shirin comes in from her bath, pink and clean and smelling of the rose-scented soap, in her pajamas, clutching a mirror. She arranges herself between her parents on the sofa with the ease of a small animal finding the warmest spot, inserting herself into the space between them with total confidence in her welcome. Dariush puts his arm around her without looking up from his page. Mariam turns a page of her own. Behrooz enters the room, surveys the situation, decides it is acceptable, and settles on the armchair across from them with the elaborate and specific satisfaction of a cat finding the exact spot it was looking for. The evening goes on. The house is quiet, except for the sounds of pages turning and, outside, the night sounds of the city. The traffic thinning but not gone. Somewhere in the distance, a dog. The faint music from a radio in a neighbor's house. Something with a daf and a santur, and a woman's voice rising in the particular scale that sounds like longing, even when the words are something else entirely. At 9 o'clock, Shirin is asleep against Dariush's arm. He looks at Mariam. She looks at him. He carries her to bed. Mariam goes to the kitchen, makes tea, stands at the window and looks at the courtyard. The pomegranate tree is a dark shape against the darker dark of the night sky. The fountain makes its imperfect sound. The city breathes. Dariush comes back. He takes the glass of tea she has poured for him. They sit at the kitchen table, not the sitting room, the way they often do at this hour, because the kitchen feels right for the late-night conversations, the ones that happen after the child is asleep and the day is done and the two of them adjust themselves again. They talk, not about anything in particular, not about anything urgent. They talk about the book she is reading and whether she thinks the ending will be what she expects. They talk about a letter they received from his sister in Shiraz, who is expecting a baby in the spring. They talk, briefly, about money. Not anxiously, just practically. The kind of conversation that is part of maintaining a household, the small accounting of things. Then they are quiet. Outside, a call to prayer from the distant mosque floats in through the open window, and then is gone. Dariush finishes his tea. He says, "I'm going to sleep." She nods. She stays in the kitchen for a little while longer. She is thinking about the book she is reading, the 3 generations of women in Azerbaijan, the things they pass between them without speaking. She is thinking about what it means to live in a time that will, in retrospect, turn out to be a time of change, and whether you can feel it while you are in it or only afterward. She does not know yet. None of them know yet what is coming. How could they? The streets outside are full of people who are simply living, simply working, simply making their daily negotiations with a world that is what it is, a world they did not make, but in which they are fully, completely, sometimes painfully alive. She gets up. She turns off the kitchen light. She goes through the dark house, her hand trailing the wall, her feet knowing the floor. She goes to bed. Chapter 7. The School of Shirin. The school where Shirin studies is called, officially, a name long enough and official enough that most of the parents who go there have shortened it to simply Dabistan Vali Asa, the primary school on Vali Asa Street. It is a state school, not a private one, though some of the children who go there come from families who could afford the private schools further north, but choose this one for reasons of their own: proximity, convenience, principle, habit. The building is 3 stories of yellow brick around a central courtyard. The courtyard has a large plane tree and a set of parallel bars and a water fountain with a button you press to make the water arc up in a curve and then fall. The water fountain is used a great deal in September and October before the weather turns cold, and then abandoned from November to March, and then used again in spring with the enthusiasm of people rediscovering something that was always there. Shirin's teacher this year is a woman named Khanum Malavi. She is 45 years old. She has been teaching this grade for 18 years. She has, over those 18 years, taught approximately 900 children their letters and their numbers, and how to sit still for 40 minutes at a time, which is, in Mariam's opinion, an achievement worth more recognition than it receives. Khanum Malavi has a way of speaking that is very precise and very clear, each word separate and complete, as if she has decided that language exists to communicate and intends to use it for that purpose without ornamentation or ambiguity. She does not shout. She has never, as far as anyone can tell, lost her temper in class. She operates from a position of complete and unquestioned authority that she wears so lightly and naturally it barely registers as authority. Shirin is slightly in awe of her. This is not something Shirin would admit. She talks about Khanum Malavi with the casual confidence of a child who has decided that her teacher is, on balance, acceptable. But the way she talks about her, the detail, the accuracy, the slight increase in tone, says something else. The school day begins at 8 in the morning. Mariam walks Shirin to the school bus stop at 7:50. It takes 4 minutes to walk from the house to the stop at the corner of the street. And these 4 minutes are Mariam's favorite part of the school day routine. The part that is entirely unscheduled and unhurried. The part where she and Shirin walk together and talk or do not talk. just moving through the morning air together. On this particular October morning, the air has that quality it gets in Tehran in October. Cool, but not cold, with a smell of leaves beginning to change, and something that is not quite autumn, but is becoming it. The way a sentence can begin to change the meaning of itself before it finishes. Shirin is talking about a dream she had. In the dream, she tells Mariam the school was made of bread. Not real bread, but very big bread, soft and white. And the walls were it, and the floors were it. And you could eat the walls, but you weren't supposed to. But one girl did, and she made a hole, and through the hole you could see a garden. What was in the garden? Mariam asks. Shirin thinks about this with genuine concentration. Horses, she says finally, with flowers on them. Flowers growing on horses, like decorations, but real flowers. Mariam considers this image. They have reached the bus stop. 3 other children are there already. 2 boys kicking a stone back and forth, and a girl named Farideh, who is Shirin's closest friend and who is currently wearing a hat that appears to be shaped like a fish. Shirin sees Farideh and takes off. Mariam watches her go, watches her arrive at Farideh's side, watches the immediate, total absorption in each other that characterizes the friendship of 7-year-olds. The way they close around each other like water closing around a dropped stone. The bus comes. Shirin gets on without looking back. This is correct. This is right. A child who gets on the bus without looking back is a child who trusts the world enough not to need to check that her mother is still there. Mariam knows this. She turns and walks home. Chapter 8. The Men of the Ministry. Let me tell you about Dariush's world, which is a different Tehran from Mariam's, but the same city. The Ministry of Culture is in a building not far from the central district, a building that was put up in the early 1960s in the style of those years. Functional, slightly imposing, trying for modernity and achieving something that reads 20 years later as a kind of optimism that has not quite aged as well as it intended. Inside, the building is a maze of corridors and offices and meeting rooms, and has the particular smell of all large government buildings, a smell of paper and cigarette smoke, and the particular variety of coffee made from grounds percolated in a small aluminum pot on a single ring burner in every 3rd office. Dariush works in the Cultural Heritage Documentation Division. He has worked here for 9 years, since he finished his degree in musicology at the University of Tehran, and applied for a government position more because his professor advised it than because he had any particular plan. He has, over 9 years, come to believe in the work, in the genuine importance of documenting the folk music traditions of a country that is changing fast, faster than most people acknowledge, changing in ways that will make certain things disappear if they are not caught and preserved in the amber of recording and notation. He travels sometimes. In the spring and autumn, he goes on field trips to provinces where the oral traditions are strongest, to Kurdistan, to Gilan, on the Caspian coast, to the villages of Khorasan, where the old forms of music have been maintained through generations of transmission from father to son, mother to daughter, in the way of things that exist because they have always existed and are kept alive by that same logic. He carries a reel-to-reel tape recorder on these trips, a device that weighs considerably more than it seems it should, and notebooks and pencils, and a patience for sitting and waiting that is not natural to him, but that he has cultivated because the music does not come until the musician trusts you, and the musician's trust cannot be hurried. When he returns from these trips, he brings things home. He brings Mariam fabric. He has an eye for it, a kind of visual sensitivity that he rarely deploys in his own clothing, but is acute when it comes to cloth. And he finds things on these trips that she would not have found herself. From Kurdistan, he brought a piece of embroidered felt, deep red with geometric animals on it, that she has made into a small cushion cover and placed on the sofa. From Khorasan, he brought a length of indigo-dyed cotton, hand-woven with a pattern of tiny stars, that she has kept folded in the chest in the bedroom and has not yet made into anything because she cannot decide what would be worthy of it. He brings Shirin things too, small things, a carved wooden bird from a village market, a story told on the drive home and retold in the kitchen while Mariam cooked, about a man who kept a singing fox, which Shirin has been requesting on repeat since the first telling, and which Dariush embellishes slightly differently each time in ways that Shirin notes with the vigilance of a child determined to hold the story to its original shape. But his work is not only these trips. Most of it is office work. The tedium of bureaucracy, the filing and the meetings, and the forms that exist in triplicate for reasons that no one can precisely explain, and that are required by other forms that are required by still others. He is patient with this too, but less naturally so. He is good at managing the politics of an office, the relationships, the careful positioning, the knowledge of when to push and when to let something go. But it costs him something, this management, and the cost is visible in the way he looks when he comes home in the evenings, the slight flatness of him, the way he needs 15 minutes to become himself again. His colleagues are a varied group. There is Manucher, who is 50 and has been in the ministry since before Dariush was born, who knows where every file lives and every rule applies and every exception has been granted in the last 2 decades, and who deploys this knowledge with the generosity of a man who wants to be useful, and the occasional calculation of a man who knows that being the person who knows things is a form of security. There is Farhad, who is 30 and Dariush's closest colleague, a man who grew up in Avaz in the southwest and who came to Tehran for university and stayed, and who has the slightly wary alertness of someone from elsewhere in a city of insiders. Farhad is very funny in a completely deadpan way that Mariam likes whenever she meets him, the kind of funny that is so dry it takes a second to land, and then is somehow funnier for the delay. And there is his section head, whose name Dariush mentions in the way you mention a recurring weather system, not with particular animosity, but with the resigned awareness that it is a feature of the environment that will continue to be relevant, regardless of your preferences about it. One afternoon in October 1974, the same October we have been following, the October of the dream about the bread school and the horses with flowers, Dariush comes home later than usual. It is nearly 8 o'clock. Shirin is already in bed. Mariam has kept dinner warm, as she always does when he is late. Not anxiously, but practically. the kind of keeping warm that is part of having a household and accommodating the unpredictability of another person's schedule. She hears the door. She hears him in the hallway. She brings the food to the table. He comes into the kitchen and sits down without speaking. She looks at him. He picks up his spoon. He eats. She waits. After several minutes, he says, "They are cutting the budget for the folk music archive." She does not say anything immediately. She pours him tea. "How much?" she asks. He tells her. It is significant enough to mean that 2 of the planned regional recording trips will not happen, and that a project to catalogue the Bakhtiari repertoire, which Dariush has been working toward for 2 years, a project he believes is genuinely urgent because the Bakhtiari singers who know the old forms are old themselves, will be, in his section head's phrase, postponed indefinitely. She watches his face. He is not angry, exactly. He has moved through anger into something quieter, a kind of grief. She says, "Is there any other source, any possibility?" He has thought about this. He outlines the options, which are limited. There is a foundation, private, that funds some cultural projects, but their priorities are different. There is the possibility of a joint project with the university, but that requires a proposal and a committee and a timeline that puts anything useful very far away. She listens. She asks questions. Not to provide solutions. She does not have solutions, but because having the problem heard and examined is part of what can be done with it. After a while, he finishes eating. He looks slightly better. Not resolved. The problem is not resolved and cannot be tonight, but slightly less alone with it. She clears the plates. He goes to look in on Shirin. When he comes back to the kitchen, he says, "She's got Amir in a full medical situation in there. All the animals on the bed. She's asleep in the middle of them." Mariam smiles. They drink their late tea. Outside, Tehran sleeps. It's millions of people in their beds, in their houses and apartments, and in the southern districts where the houses are closer together and smaller and noisier. All of them carrying their days into the dark, setting them down, breathing out. Chapter 9. Nowruz. The Persian New Year. There is no word in any language that quite captures what Nowruz is. The closest translation is Persian New Year, but this is insufficient. The way that calling a cathedral a building is technically accurate, but wholly inadequate. Nowruz is not simply the new year. Nowruz is the oldest festival in the world that is still observed, going back 4,000 to 5,000 years to the ancient Persian calendar, predating Islam, predating Alexander, predating almost everything that the modern world considers ancient. It is the first day of spring. It begins at the exact astronomical moment the sun crosses the celestial equator, the vernal equinox, to the second. In 1974, this moment falls at 10 minutes past 2 in the afternoon on the 20th of March, and the entire country will be aware of it and will mark it in ways ranging from the deeply ceremonial to the entirely personal. The weeks before Nowruz are their own season. They are called the Chahar-Shanbe Suri season, and they begin with the last Wednesday of the old year, Chahar-Shanbe Suri, the Wednesday of fire, and build through 2 weeks of preparation into the great moment itself. The city changes in these weeks. The bazaars fill with specific goods available only at this time of year. painted eggs in every color and pattern, their shells transformed by skill and dye into small objects of improbable beauty. Goldfish in plastic bags, swimming their few millimeters in a liquid that shines under the market lights. Sabze, the sprouts of wheat or lentils grown specifically for this festival. They're green, the particular shade of new growth and new beginning. The 7 symbolic items of the Haftzin table, each beginning with the Persian letter S. Sabze, Samanu, Senjed, Seer, Seb, Somak, Sirke, sprouts, wheat pudding, Alista berries, garlic, apple, sumac, vinegar. Each one a symbol, collectively an altar to the new year. Mariam begins preparing for Nowruz 3 weeks in advance. This is the traditional beginning. Kune to kune, the house shaking, the deep cleaning that precedes the new year with the philosophical insistence that you cannot enter a new cycle carrying the dust and disorder of the old one. The house is cleaned from top to bottom, from the inside of the storage cupboards to the tops of the window frames to the underside of the large carpet in the sitting room, which must be taken out to the courtyard and beaten, a task that Dariush performs with a carpet beater made of woven willow that was his mother's, and which he uses for this specific purpose once a year and stores the rest of the time hanging on the wall of the storage room. The beating of the carpet is an event. It happens on a Saturday morning, 2 weeks before Nowruz. Dariush hauls the carpet out of the sitting room. It is a large Tabriz carpet, traditional patterns in deep red and blue and ivory. Not very old, but good quality. A wedding gift from Mariam's parents. And drags it to the courtyard and throws it over the washing line. He beats it. The dust rises in clouds. He beats it again. More dust. Mariam watches from the kitchen window with the satisfaction of a person watching something being thoroughly done. Sharon assists by standing at a safe distance and telling Dariush when she can see more dust, which is always, because there is always more dust. After the carpet, Dariush sits in the courtyard and drinks tea and looks as if he has accomplished something significant, which in the quiet accounting of household maintenance he has. And Mariam brings him a glass and sits beside him for a few minutes before going back in to continue the cleaning. She cleans everything. She washes all the curtains. She takes down every item from every shelf in the kitchen and washes the shelves and replaces everything in a slightly better arrangement. She goes through the storage room and discards things that have accumulated in the way things accumulate in storage rooms. Things put there temporarily that have become permanent through inattention. Things that are broken, but not broken enough to throw away. Things whose original purpose has been forgotten. She makes decisions with the calm efficiency of a woman who has done this many times and has arrived at the useful understanding that the question, is this still useful, must be answered honestly rather than hopefully. Many things are thrown away. The storage room looks, afterward, like a room that has had a thought. In the kitchen, she makes samanu. Samanu is a pudding made from wheat germ, and the making of it takes 2 days and is traditionally done with other women, which is how it has been done for centuries. A group of women around a large pot, taking turns stirring, singing while they stir. The process transformed by company and song from a domestic chore into something more ceremonial, more meaningful, more alive. Sore comes, Nahid comes, Farangiz comes, and brings her own wooden spoon, which she says is better than anyone else's, and which Mariam suspects is her way of ensuring she gets a turn at the stirring that meets her standards. They work through an afternoon and an evening. The smell of samanu is warm and slightly sweet and deeply specific to this time of year and this ritual, and it fills the kitchen and spreads through the house and out into the courtyard. And Mariam thinks, as she always thinks when she smells it, of her grandmother's kitchen in Tabriz, where she learned to make samanu the first time, as a girl, standing beside her grandmother, who stirred with her whole body, rocking slightly with the rhythm of it, singing in a low voice that was more vibration than melody. Her grandmother has been dead for 12 years. She is present in this kitchen tonight, stirring. They talk, these women around the pot, they talk about Nowruz memories, which is what you talk about when you are making samanu, because the making of it and the remembering are inseparable. Nahid talks about the Nowruzes of her childhood in Isfahan, the specific quality of the light there on New Year's morning, the way the whole city seemed to slow down and become more itself in those first hours. Ferengis talks about a Nowruz during the war years. She means the Second World War, when there were shortages and the Haft Sin table was incomplete, and her mother cried when she thought no one could see her, because an incomplete Haft Sin table feels, to the woman who has made it, like a failure, even when the failure is not hers. Mariam talks about the Nowruz when Shirin was 2, her first Nowruz old enough to have some sense of what was happening, how she sat at the table at the moment of the Tarvil, the exact second of the New Year's arrival, with enormous solemnity, her small face very serious, holding one of the painted eggs that Mariam had given her to touch. And when the clock reached the moment and Dariush called out Eid Mubarak, Nowruz, Happy New Year, Shirin looked up and said with absolute sincerity, "Very good." The women around the pot laugh. Outside, the Tehran night is full of the particular electricity of the Nowruz season, the feeling that accumulates in the weeks before spring, the collective anticipation of a city preparing to begin again. Chapter 10. Chahar-Shanbe, Suri, the Night of Fire. The last Wednesday before Nowruz is the Night of Fire. Chahar-Shanbe Suri is the night when fires are lit in the streets and people jump over them, calling out to the fire, "Give me your warmth and your redness. Take from me my paleness and my illness." It is pre-Islamic, this ritual. It is very old. It is the kind of ritual that no amount of religious or political prescription has ever quite managed to extinguish, because it is connected to something in the body that is older than any doctrine. The human relationship with fire, the primal pleasure of leaping over a flame, the ancient belief that fire cleanses and renews. In the neighborhood on Vali Asr Street, the fires go up at dusk, not large fires. The street fires of Chahar-Shanbe Suri in the cities are modest affairs, small bundles of dried brush and wood that burn brightly for a few minutes and then subside into embers that cool slowly in the night air. But there are many of them, up and down the street, in the alleys, in the small squares, so that the whole neighborhood seems to be studded with points of light, and the smell of wood smoke drifts through everything and will be in everyone's clothes and hair tomorrow. Shirin is beside herself with excitement. She has been beside herself with excitement about Chahar-Shanbe Suri since roughly the beginning of the week, when she first smelled wood smoke from someone jumping the gun and lighting a fire early. She has been asking about it every morning and evening with the persistence of a child who wants to make absolutely sure that this event she has been waiting for all year, is actually going to happen, and that she is going to be included in it. She is 7. She has jumped the fires before. She is not afraid of them. But the jumping itself is only part of it. The part she loves most, the part she has been anticipating with the most intensity, is the part that happens in the streets before the jumping. The fireworks and sparklers and the noise and the feeling of the whole neighborhood being outside at once, alive with fire and motion. They go out at 8 o'clock. Dariush carries Shirin on his shoulders for the first few minutes until she decides she is too old for this and demands to be put down. And then she takes one of each of their hands and they walk along the street together. The fires are going already. At the far end of the street, the largest one is burning, tended by a group of teenagers who are treating the fire tending with the seriousness of boys who have decided that this is their responsibility and intend to discharge it with appropriate gravity. Neighbors are out. The street is full. People Mariam knows well, and people she knows only by sight, and people she does not know at all, are all occupying the street together, the way streets are designed to allow. But that happens, actually, only on nights like this. Sore is there with her 3 sons, the eldest of whom is 15, and manages to project both extreme coolness about the whole thing and intense anticipation of the moment he can jump the fire simultaneously in the manner of 15-year-olds everywhere. Nahid is there with her husband, who has a camera with him and is documenting everything with the particular intensity of a man who has recently acquired a new camera. Farangiz is there with her daughter and her daughter's children, and she stands watching everything with a slightly triumphant expression of a woman who has been watching Chaharshanbe Suri for a very long time and finds it essentially unchanged, and this fact satisfying. Shirin pulls Mariam forward toward the nearest fire. "Jump with me," she says. Mariam has jumped the Chaharshanbe Suri fires since she was a small girl in Tabriz, where the fires were larger and the winters colder and the spring felt further away and therefore more worth celebrating. She has not jumped one in several years. She is not sure why exactly, only that at some point in adulthood she became a watcher of certain things rather than a participant, and now Shirin is pulling her back. She lets herself be pulled. They stand in front of the fire. It is about a foot high, orange and hot, its edges soft with ash. Shirin grips her hand very tightly. "On 3, Mariam says. "On 3, Shirin agrees. They count, they jump. The fire passes beneath their feet in a second. And then they are on the other side, and Shirin screams with delight, and Mariam feels something she had forgotten she was missing, a specific bodily pleasure, the pleasure of a small act of courage performed in the company of someone you love, the pleasure of the body doing a thing rather than watching it be done. "Zadi ye man as to," she calls. "Give me your warmth." "Sorkiye to Asman," Shirin shouts. "Take my redness." They jump again and again. Around them, the street is alive with fire and sound, and the smell of smoke, and the voices of children, and the voices of adults becoming temporarily childlike. And somewhere nearby, a drum is being played, an ancient rhythm, and the night is cold, and the fires are warm, and the year is almost done, and the new one is almost here. Chapter 11. A letter from the north. In the spring of 1975, a letter arrives. It comes from Dariush's sister, Parisa, who lives in Rasht, on the Caspian coast. She has been married for 5 years to a man who farms rice. The paddy fields of Gilan are famous. The rice from them, a specific variety, short-grained and fragrant, the kind that makes pilaf of a quality that people from other provinces consider somewhat unfairly to be the only real rice in Iran. Parisa writes good letters, long letters, detailed, full of observation and humor, and the kind of honesty between siblings that is available without the performance that other relationships require. She writes about the farm, the rice season beginning, the way the paddy fields look in spring when they are first flooded and the sky reflects in them, and you cannot tell at a certain angle where the water ends and the sky begins. She writes about the new baby. The baby was born in March, 2 days after Nowruz, a timing Parisa calls prophetic, since anyone born in the first week of spring clearly has strong feelings about beginnings. The baby is a girl. Her name is Nega. She is 8 weeks old and, in her mother's opinion, the most observant infant in the history of infants, a baby who watches everything with an attention that suggests she is already forming opinions and will share them in due course. She writes that she wants them to visit. Come this summer, she writes, before it gets too hot here, and you know how it gets. Come in June when the rice is new and the forests are full and the Caspian is cold and blue and Nagar can meet her cousin for the first time. Mariam reads the letter at the kitchen table on a Sunday morning. Dariush beside her reading the newspaper, the sounds of Shirin's weekend morning, which involve a considerable degree of creative play in her bedroom, currently featuring what sounds like the resolution of the ongoing dispute between Amir and a slightly larger stuffed bear named Rostam, drifting through the wall. We should go, she says. He looks up. She shows him the letter. He reads it. He smiles at the part about Nagar's opinions. He reads the invitation. June, he says. She nods. He does the mental calculation of a man working out whether his schedule can accommodate what his heart already wants to do. June works, he says. She picks up her tea. She is already thinking about the drive. They will drive. They always drive. It is part of the pleasure. The road through the mountains, the tunnel at Kandovan. The moment you come out on the northern side and the whole landscape changes, the air thickens, the vegetation goes from the spare and mineral character of the Tehran plateau to the dense, dripping green of the Caspian forests, and the smell of the air is entirely different, damp and alive, and you can feel the sea before you see it. She is looking forward to this. She writes back to Parisa that afternoon. The letter she writes is 2 pages, in her clear, slightly formal handwriting. She was told by her teacher at school that she had beautiful handwriting and has never stopped thinking of it as one of her best qualities. She writes about Shirin, who is growing fast and who recently announced that she intends to be either a doctor or a horse. She writes about Dariush's work and the budget cuts. without dwelling on them. She writes about the neighborhood and the Nowruz gathering and the Samanu that came out particularly well this year. She writes about the ordinary life, and the ordinary life, reading it back before she seals the envelope, seems, in the way that only writing about things makes them visible, quite beautiful. Chapter 12. Summer at the Sea. The drive to Rasht takes approximately 5 hours, depending on traffic through the mountains, and Dariush's willingness to stop for tea, which has always been inconsistent. They leave at 6 in the morning, before the city has fully woken up. Shirin asleep in the back seat almost before they have left the street. Amir clutched against her chest, a blanket pulled up around both of them. Tehran in the pre-dawn is a different city. The traffic is almost gone. The wide boulevards, which at any normal hour are choked and loud, are clear, and you can see the city's geometry. The long straight lines of the avenues, the grid of the blocks, the mountains rising behind everything, their silhouettes against a sky going from black to the deepest blue, then to grey, then to the pale gold of the sun coming. Dariush drives. Mariam sits with her feet up on the dashboard, which she only does when there is no one to see her do it, because it is not the kind of thing she would admit to in general. She has a thermos of tea between her hands. They do not talk much in the first hour. This is comfortable, the kind of silence that is not absence but presence. 2 people in a car in the early morning, the city falling away behind them. The mountain road begins near Karaj. The road climbs. The landscape changes. The flat, pale expanse of the Tehran plateau gives way to rocky slopes, and the road winds upward through switchbacks, and the air coming through the cracked window is colder and sharper and tastes of altitude. Shirin wakes at the mountains. She always wakes at the mountains. Some children sleep through anything. Shirin has always been sensitive to changes in elevation, or perhaps to the quality of light that comes with mountains, and she surfaces from sleep gradually, reaching first for Amir, then looking out the window with the steady attention of a child re-establishing her position in the world. "Are we there?" she asks. "Mountains," Dariush says. She looks at the mountains. She nods. She goes back to sleep. They stop for tea at a roadside chai khane near the top of the pass. The tea house is a simple place, a concrete building with a corrugated tin roof and a sign, and inside a few tables and chairs and a large samovar, and a man behind the counter who looks as if he has been there since the road was built and will be there when it is replaced. The tea is very hot and very dark. The view from the table by the window is of the valley dropping away below them, the road descending in curves, the peaks above catching the morning light. Shirin has woken properly by now. She drinks a small glass of diluted tea and eats a piece of bread with cheese that Mariam has brought from home in a small cloth bag, because Shirin does not always eat unfamiliar food in unfamiliar places, and it is better to have something known. She looks out the window. She says, "The mountains look like they're thinking." Mariam looks at the mountains. She thinks perhaps they are. The descent on the north side of the pass is where the journey transforms. You come out of the tunnel, the Kandovan tunnel, cut through the rock of the Alborz range, dark and slightly miraculous, and you are in another country. Not literally, but the change is so complete, so immediate, that it has the feeling of a border crossed. The air is different, wet and warm against the dry cold of the high road. The vegetation is different. Everything green, suddenly, extravagantly green. The roadside thick with trees and ferns and plants that Mariam does not know the names of, but recognizes as belonging to this specific landscape. The smell is different, earth and damp and leaves and something oceanic and vast beneath all of it. Shirin presses her face to the glass. "The sea," she says. "Is it soon?" "Still an hour," Dariush says. She considers this. She returns to the window, watching. The road winds through forest. The light through the trees is green and moving, the way light is in water. They pass through small towns with their particular northern Iranian architecture. Houses built on stilts in some of the older villages, with wooden galleries and steeply pitched roofs designed to shed the considerable rainfall of this coast. They pass tea plantations on the hillsides. The tea bushes are dark green and round, trimmed into neat shapes, covering the hills in a pattern that looks, from certain angles, like the surface of something alive. And then, between two hills, for a moment, before the road curves away again and hides it, the sea, the Caspian, flat and blue-grey and enormous, extending to a horizon so far away it looks like the edge of the world. "The sea," Shirin shouts, even though she can no longer see it, even though the road has taken it away. She knows it is there now, and it does not need to be visible to be present. They arrive at Parisa's farm near noon. Parisa is standing in front of the house with Nagar in her arms. She is taller than Dariush, which is unusual, and has the quality of people who have spent a lot of time outdoors. A certain ease in her body, a comfort with space and movement. She is wearing a loose cotton dress, her hair pulled back. One sleeve of the dress slightly damp from where Nagar has apparently been using it as a surface. Nagar is 8 weeks old. She is a small, alert creature with dark eyes that are already, as Parisa described, focused and watchful. She is wearing a small hat that is slightly too large for her head. Shirin is frozen. She has never been this close to a very small baby. She stands at a careful distance, not reaching out, not speaking, simply looking with a particular concentrated attention of a child encountering something new that requires full processing. "Can I hold her?" she asks in a whisper. Mariam looks at Parisa. Parisa sits on the bench by the door and arranges Nagar in Shirin's arms with the practiced casualness of a woman who has been doing this constantly for 8 weeks. Shirin holds the baby. She holds her very carefully. Her arms are very stiff. Her face is the face of someone who has been given responsibility of the highest order and intends to discharge it without error. She looks down at Nagar. Nagar looks up at her. For a moment, they simply look at each other, these two small people, at such different stages of the same beginning. And there is something in this looking that makes everyone watching go quiet. "Hello," Shirin says, in a very small voice. Chapter 13. Rice fields at dusk. They stay for a week. It is a week that Mariam will remember for the rest of her life with the particular vividness that some stretches of ordinary happiness acquire. The specific clarity of days lived at the right pace, in the right place, in the company of people you love. Parisa's husband, Mahmoud, is a quiet man, not shy. He talks readily enough, has strong opinions about rice varieties and water management, and the particular qualities of the northern soil that he will share at length with anyone who asks, but economical with words in everyday conversation, as if he has made a practical calculation that most things do not require as many words as people tend to use on them. He shows Dariush the rice fields. They go in the evening, when the light is long and low, and the water in the paddies catches it and holds it, so that the whole field seems to be made of light rather than water. The rice is new, just planted, thin green lines in the flooded earth. Delicate and precise, Mahmoud talks about the rice with a love that is not sentimental but physical. He loves the rice the way a craftsman loves material, with the love of a person who knows exactly how something is made and what it requires and what can go wrong and what it looks like when it goes right. Dariush listens with genuine attention. Mariam watches them from the edge of the field, standing on the raised path between the paddies, Shirin beside her, both of them looking at the two men walking slowly along the flooded rows, their silhouettes against the evening sky, the herons that stand in the shallows at the far end of the field, watching everything with their ancient, aristocratic patience. "This is beautiful," Shirin says. "It is," Mariam says. "Why is it beautiful?" Shirin asks. This is a real question. Shirin is 8 now. Her birthday was in January, and she has entered the phase where she asks real questions and expects real answers. Mariam considers it. "Because it is very old," she says finally. "People have been growing rice like this here for thousands of years, and the fields look the same now as they did then, and the herons were here then too." Shirin absorbs this. "And the sky," she says. "The sky is the same." "Yes," Mariam says. "The sky is the same." They watch the men walk through the field. The herons stand. The light deepens. At night they eat on the veranda, which runs the full length of the back of the farmhouse and faces the forest. Parisa cooks the rice, of course. Rice as it is made in this region, with a crust at the bottom, the tardig, golden and crisp, which Mahmoud gives to Shirin as the honored guest, placing it on her plate with the gravity of a man presenting something of real value. They drink doo, the cold yogurt drink that is the drink of this coast in summer, slightly salty, slightly sour, absolutely right for a hot evening. The forest behind the farm is alive at night. The sounds of it come in waves, insects mainly, the particular vibrating chorus of a northern Iranian summer night, supplemented by frogs near the water and occasionally the distant sound of something larger moving in the trees. Nagar sleeps in her basket in the corner of the veranda, apparently indifferent to the noise. They talk late into the night. What they talk about is various and wide-ranging, and the specific content of it disperses into the general warmth of memory, the way the precise words of good conversations do. What remains is not the sentences, but the feeling of them, the feeling of being fully present with people you love, of the conversation being exactly the right length and covering exactly the right ground. At some point, it is past midnight. Shirin falls asleep sitting up, and Dariush carries her to bed, and Mariam sits with Parisa for a while longer, the two of them with their tea in the dark, the forest making its sounds. "You're happy," Parisa says. It is not a question. Mariam thinks about it. "Yes," she says. "Mostly." Parisa nods. "Mostly is good," she says. "Mostly is enough." Chapter 14. The Bazaar of Tabriz. In the spring of 1976, Mariam's mother becomes ill The illness is not sudden. It has been coming for a year, various symptoms appearing and being explained away, until it cannot be explained away anymore and becomes a fact. Mariam goes to Tabriz. She takes Shirin with her. Shirin is 9 now, old enough to understand that something serious is happening, and mature enough, mostly, to respond to it with the gravity it requires. Dariush stays in Tehran for the first week for work and comes up on the train on the Friday. Tabriz is 3 days by road from Tehran, or 8 hours by train, or less by the new expressway if you do not stop. It sits in the northwest of the country, near the borders with Turkey and the Soviet Union, in a broad valley surrounded by mountains, and it has the quality of a city that has always been on the edge of things, the edge of empires, the edge of trade routes, the edge of languages, sitting at the intersection of Farsi and Azeri and Turkish and Kurdish, all of which are spoken in the city and the villages around it in various combinations and for various historical reasons. It is Mariam's home city. She feels this immediately, arriving on the train, looking out the window at the landscape that is so different from Tehran's, more open, more austere, the mountains older and more worn, the colors of the earth more muted, pale gold and grey, and the dark green of the alpine pastures above the city. She feels it in a physical way, the way you feel the approach of a place your body learned before your mind did. Her mother is at the house where Mariam grew up, the house in the old residential quarter, not far from the Grand Bazaar of Tabriz, which is one of the oldest covered bazaars in the world, and which has been there in various forms since at least the 13th century, and possibly longer. The house is smaller than she remembers. This always happens when you return to the place of your childhood. After many years, the rooms shrink, the ceilings drop. The courtyard becomes an ordinary courtyard rather than the enormous space of memory. But the smell is the same. Every house has a smell that is its own, layered from cooking and people and time, and her mother's house smells of the particular combination of cardamom and old stone and the slightly sweet smell of the wood of the built-in cupboards in the corridor. And this smell enters her body through her nose and does something to her chest that is nothing to do with her lungs. Her mother is in bed in the back bedroom, propped on 3 pillows, reading when Mariam comes in. She looks smaller too. This is the illness. It takes space from a person before it takes anything else, diminishes the scale of them gradually. But her eyes are the same. They are the same dark, sharp, slightly amused eyes that Mariam has known all her life. The eyes of a woman who has never quite been fooled by anything and has never thought it necessary to pretend to be. Mariam, she says, finally. It has been 4 months. The last time Mariam came was at Nowruz, and now it is June, and her mother's tone is reproach and warmth simultaneously, in the proportion that only mothers manage. You look thin, she says. Mariam is not thin, but this too is something mothers say. She sits on the edge of the bed. They talk. Shirin stands in the doorway, suddenly shy, which is not her usual mode. Mariam's mother holds out her hand. Shirin comes over. She allows herself to be looked at and then kissed on both cheeks, and then looked at again. You're getting tall, Mariam's mother says. I know, Shirin says, with the slight embarrassment of children for whom physical growing feels like something that is happening to them without their permission. she goes to find her cousins. Mariam and her mother are alone. They talk about the illness, directly, the way they have always talked about serious things. Mariam's mother does not find indirectness useful in the face of medical facts and has never used it. The illness is treatable, but not curable, manageable, but not reversible. The goal is comfort and time, and maintaining, for as long as possible, the quality of a life that has been very full and is not done being full yet. Mariam's mother says, "I want to go to the bazaar next week." Mariam says, "We'll see." Her mother says, "That is not the same as yes." Mariam says, "No." Her mother looks at her for a moment. Then she says, "There is a woman in the bazaar who sells cloth in the copper section. She has had there for 30 years. She's been there longer than most of the buildings around her. When I can't go anymore, I want you to go and buy something from her. Something you'll use. Something that will last." Mariam takes this in. She says, "We'll go together." Her mother says, "Inshallah." Chapter 15. Inside the Bazaar of Tabriz. The Grand Bazaar of Tabriz is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, though this designation will not come for another 30-odd years, and in 1976 it is simply what it has always been. The largest roofed market in the world, a city within a city, a place so old and so layered that it contains entire histories in its stones. It covers approximately 35 hectares of covered passages and domed spaces and interconnected halls and khans. The large courtyard spaces where caravans once stopped and where merchants still gather, and where the ceiling of each dome is a different size and shape. The light coming through holes at the peaks of the domes in columns that move across the floor as the sun moves. The smell of it is the smell of centuries. On the day they go, Mariam and her mother and Shirin and Mariam's sister Faize, the late morning light is making those columns on the floor of the carpet hall, and the dust they disturb as they walk is visible in the light, floating slowly upward. Her mother walks with a cane now. She walks slowly, which is not how she has ever walked, and Mariam watches her adjust to this new pace with something that looks very much like stubbornness, not denying the slowness, but refusing to make it mean anything about her dignity. They walk through the carpet section first. The carpets in the Tabriz Bazaar are some of the finest in Iran, not the most expensive. The truly rare pieces have their own dealers in the old khans and do not need to hang in public view. But what hangs here in the stalls and lies rolled in the dim passageways behind the merchants is still extraordinary. Deep reds and blues and the golden yellows of saffron, the geometric patterns of tribal work, and the elaborate medallion designs of the court tradition, the dense pile of the finest work, and the flatter, rougher weave of the village pieces. Shirin walks slowly, looking at everything. She has her hands clasped behind her back because she has been told by everyone at various times not to touch the carpets. But she looks. Her face as she looks has the expression Mariam recognizes as the expression she has when she is memorizing something, when she is putting something into the permanent storage of her experience. They find the cloth merchant in the section that runs alongside the copper vendors. They can hear the coppersmiths working as they walk, the sound of hammers on metal, regular and musical, echoing in the vaulted space. The woman is perhaps 70. She sits behind a counter covered in bolts of cloth stacked and organized with the precision of a person who knows the location and quality of every item without having to check. She is wearing dark blue herself, a color that makes her look permanent, as if she has always been this color, as if this color were part of the bazaar's architecture. She knows Mariam's mother, not dramatically. She does not rise or embrace her or perform surprise. She simply meets her eyes, and the meeting of their eyes contains everything about 30 years of buying cloth in this bazaar, of being known and knowing, the long, quiet compact of a transaction repeated enough times to become a relationship. Mariam's mother buys a piece of embroidered silk. It is not a large piece, perhaps a meter of it, dark gold silk with a pattern of pomegranate flowers in dark red. It is the kind of cloth that is not for clothing, but for something lasting, a cushion cover perhaps, or a panel, or simply to be held and looked at. Mariam watches her mother hold it in both hands, turning it in the dim light of the bazaar to catch the detail of the embroidery. "This is the one," her mother says. She pays. They stand in the bazaar for a while longer, the four of them, Mariam and her mother, and Faize and Shirin, in the sound of hammers and the smell of centuries, in the light falling from the dome above them in that particular column, moving slowly across the tiled floor. No one says anything. There is nothing to say that the standing together does not already say. Chapter 16. The radio. In the evenings in Tehran, particularly in the years between 1972 and 1977, the radio is central. Television exists. The house on Valley Asser Street has had a television since 1970. But the radio is different. The radio has a kind of intimacy that the television, with its imposed images, does not provide. The radio invites you to imagine. The radio fills the room with sound and leaves the rest to you. The radio in Dariush and Mariam's house is an old one. It was given to them by Dariush's parents at their wedding, and it has the wood cabinet and the gold mesh front and the dial that clicks softly through the frequencies that radios of that era had, a piece of furniture as much as a piece of technology. It sits on the bookshelf in the sitting room, between two stacks of books. In the evenings, when the work is done, and Shirin has been bathed and read to and put to bed, and the house is quiet, Mariam sometimes turns it on. She does not turn it on for news. The news on the radio is not a place where real news lives. In 1974, and 1975, and 1976, in the years before everything changes, the news on the radio is curated and managed and says what it is permitted to say. And everyone who listens to it knows this, and they listen in the way of people receiving an official communication that tells them some things and implies others and leaves the rest to inference. But music is different. The music on the national radio in these years is extraordinary. Iran has a classical music tradition, dastgah, the complex modal system that underlies Persian classical music. That is entirely different from Western classical music, organized around modes and emotional states rather than harmony and key, built on the concept of the redif, the vast body of memorized phrases and patterns that every classical musician must learn before they can be said to know the music. The masters of this tradition are still performing and recording in the mid-1970s. Shajarian is singing. Shahram Nazeri is singing. Lotfi is playing the tar. Majid Kiani is playing the santur, the hammered dulcimer, whose sound is unlike anything in Western music, bright and shimmering and deeply melancholy simultaneously, a sound that seems to exist at the exact intersection of joy and grief. Mariam listens to these things. She listens with a particular quality of attention she gives to music, which is different from her attention for words or for images, more bodily, more passive, less analytical. She does not analyze music. She receives it. It goes into her like water into ground. She sits in the sitting room after Dariush has gone to sleep. He is an early sleeper, always has been, out by 10:30 regardless of what is happening, with the radio low so as not to wake anyone, and she listens. There is a program on Tuesday nights. She does not always manage to be awake for it, but tries, that plays recordings of regional folk music, collected recordings, some very old, from different parts of the country. The music of the Kurds, which is full of a particular kind of longing that has something to do with mountains. The music of the Bakhtiari nomads, the tribal songs that accompany migration, that were made to be sung on horseback in the mountains, the music of the south, the port cities on the Persian Gulf, which has absorbed African influences from centuries of trade and has rhythms that are not quite Iranian in the familiar sense, something more open, more percussive, something that makes you want to move. She listens to all of it. She listens to the country. Chapter 17. Shirin at 10. Shirin at 10 is a person. This seems obvious. She has been a person all along, from the beginning. But at 10, something shifts. The person she is going to be becomes more visible. The outline of her future self appearing through the child she currently is. The way a landscape looks in early morning light before the details fully emerge. She is curious. This has always been true, but it intensifies at 10 into a specific intellectual curiosity, a hunger for explanation and mechanism, for understanding how things work. She takes apart a broken clock. She puts it mostly back together. There are 4 small gears whose purpose she cannot determine, and which she keeps in a small dish on her desk, in case they turn out to be important. She asks Dariush questions about his work that are more sophisticated than expected, and he answers them seriously, as equals, which she rewards with more and better questions. She is funny. This has been true for a while, but the humor becomes, at 10, more deliberate. She knows she is funny. She deploys it. She makes Mariam laugh when she is tired, and does it on purpose, gauging the situation with an accuracy that is slightly unsettling. She reads. She reads at the pace of a person who has discovered a technology that works better than expected. She has gone through the children's shelves and started on the general shelves. Mariam curates this process somewhat, not censoring exactly, but redirecting away from certain things she considers premature, while leaving in her path things she thinks Shirin is ready for. She has found the poetry. Specifically, she has found the poems of Ahmad Shamlu, which she is at 10 probably slightly young for, but which she is reading anyway. And while she cannot fully grasp their political weight, Shamlu, in the 1970s, writing his densely metaphorical poems of resistance and loss, coded in imagery so thick it could pass the censors while saying everything it needed to say. She responds to the music of them, the sound of them, the feel of the lines in her mouth when she reads them aloud, which she does, in her room, quietly. She mentions this to Mariam. Mariam asks which poem she is reading. Shirin recites the opening of one. She recites it carefully, with a slight over-deliberateness of someone who has memorized something and is presenting it. Mariam listens. She says, "Do you know what it means?" Shirin says, "Not all of it, but I like the sound of it." Mariam says, "That is a very good way to start." She does not tell her that this poem, this specific poem, is about something that has a specific political meaning in the Iran of the mid-1970s, a meaning that Mariam understands very well and that she is not ready yet to explain to her daughter. There is time. There will be time. She says, "Would you like to read more poems?" Shirin says, "Yes." She gives her foro faroxad. She watches her daughter take the slim volume and go to her room. She stands in the kitchen for a moment. Foro faroxad, whose life was short and whose poetry was the most honest accounting of what it meant to be a woman in Iran that anyone had yet written, who died in a car accident when she was 32, who was already a legend by the time she died, leaving behind a body of work that women passed between them like something both precious and contraband. Shirin comes back to the kitchen an hour later. She has the book. She says, "This woman was very brave." Mariam says, "Yes." "Why did she have to be brave to write poems?" Shirin asks. "Because what she wrote was true," Mariam says. "And sometimes truth is brave." Shirin thinks about this. She goes back to her room. Mariam listens to her go, her feet on the tiles in the hallway, the sound of the door. The city makes its sounds. The house holds its warmth. Chapter 18. A garden in Karaj. Outside Tehran, about 40 kilometers to the west, along the road that follows the river through the valley before the mountains close in again, there is a garden. Not a famous garden, not a garden in a guidebook, a private garden belonging to the family of Dariush's uncle, a man named Haj Aga Morteza, who made his money in the 1950s in the import trade and spent a portion of it in the 1960s building a garden on land he bought in the valley outside Karaj, because he believed, and he said this directly without embarrassment, that a man who has made enough money for 2 lifetimes has a responsibility to spend some of it on beauty. The garden is about 3 acres. It is organized around water, which is how traditional Persian gardens are organized. Water is the central element, the organizing principle, the thing that makes everything else possible and gives everything else its meaning. There is a central channel, a long straight rill of water running through the middle of the garden from a stone fountain at the top to a shallow pool at the bottom. Along the channel, on both sides, roses. The roses are of many kinds, old Persian varieties, some of them, the kind with many petaled flowers in deep pinks and carmines, and the pale yellow called champagne, which smell in June like the concentrated essence of every summer afternoon you have ever lived through. On either side of the roses, fruit trees, apricot and cherry and quince and plum, and at the far end, 2 walnut trees so large they must predate the garden, must have been standing in this valley when it was an orchard, and before the orchard when it was simply open land beside the river. Every spring, in May, when the roses are at their first bloom, Haj Aga Morteza holds an open day. He invites the family and the family of the family and certain friends. and the friends of friends. People come from Tehran and Karaj and the surrounding villages, and they walk in the garden, and they eat in the shade of the walnut trees, and they drink tea from a samovar that is brought out specifically for this occasion. A very large and very beautiful samovar, engraved all over its surface with hunting scenes in the Qajar style, which Haj Agha Morteza polishes himself the week before the gathering. Mariam and Dariush and Shirin have gone to this gathering every year since their marriage. The year is now 1976, and they are going again. They drive out of Tehran on a May morning, through the traffic of the western approach roads, and then onto the open highway, and the city falls away on either side, and the valley opens up, and the mountains are to the north and south simultaneously, and the light is the particular clear light of the plateau before the summer haze arrives. They arrive at the garden in the late morning. The gate is open. Through it, the garden. Mariam stands at the gate for a moment before entering. She does this every year. She does not know exactly why. Something about the transition from the ordinary road to this space requires a small ceremony of attention. The roses are at their height. She can smell them from the gate. She goes in. The party is already in progress. Haj Agha Morteza, who is now 73 and moves more slowly than he used to, but has not reduced his delight in the garden by a single degree, is standing by the fountain with 3 other old men, discussing something with the animated sincerity of very old men who have decided that time is too limited for conversation to be merely pleasant. Dariush goes to greet them. Shirin runs ahead toward the walnut trees, where a group of children she knows from previous years have already established themselves in some game whose rules are known only to them. Mariam walks along the channel. She walks slowly, because the garden requires slowness, because it was made for slowness. This garden was designed at the right pace, the pace of water moving in a channel, which is just fast enough to be alive and just slow enough to watch. The roses on either side of her are enormous. Some of the old varieties grown to a size that modern roses do not reach, their flowers the size of a child's fist. She stops by a rose she has noticed every year. It is a deep carmine, almost purple, with a smell that is different from the others, deeper and more complex, slightly spiced. She does not know its name. She should ask Haj Agha. She has meant to ask for 10 years. She bends toward it. She inhales. The smell is everything she expected, and more, because certain things are better every time. Certain pleasures deepen with familiarity, rather than diminishing. She straightens. She walks on. At the walnut trees, she sits for a while, watching the children. Shirin has been absorbed into the game, whatever it is, and is now clearly one of the people who know the rules. She is arguing for something, arms extended, face animated. She is, apparently, right about whatever she is arguing, because after a moment, the other children seem to concede. Mariam smiles. She looks up at the walnut trees. Their branches are wide and heavy with new leaves, the light through them dappled and moving in the slight wind. She can hear music somewhere. Someone has brought an instrument, a sitar by the sound of it, the small, long-necked lute, whose sound is thinner and more intimate than the tar, a sound like someone thinking out loud. She closes her eyes. She listens to the sitar. She listens to the water in the channel. She listens to the children. She is present here, fully, completely present, in the garden, in the May morning, in the smell of roses and walnut leaves and the dry earth of the valley floor. This is a kind of happiness, not the kind you chase, not the kind that comes from having everything you want, the kind that simply arrives when you are paying attention and the world happens to be delivering exactly what you need in exactly the right measure. She will remember this afternoon. She will carry it with her for the rest of her life, the way we carry the few hours that manage to be as good as we hoped, that do not disappoint, that deliver their full weight of beauty without reservation. The sitar plays, the water moves, the roses smell of everything that is going to happen and everything that has already passed. Chapter 19. The year. Everything changes. It comes slowly and then all at once. Like all large events, it was both predictable and unexpected. In retrospect, the retrospect that is always available after things have happened but never quite accessible before, the signs were everywhere. In the conversations in rooms where women drank tea and spoke carefully around the things they actually meant. In the meetings, Dariush came home from, with that particular quality of flatness, the flatness of a man who has seen the gap between what is officially true and what is actually true and is too honest not to be worn down by it. In the music that was changing, because music, in Iran as everywhere, is a register of feeling that the official channels of expression cannot access. The classical music that Mariam listened to on Tuesday nights had always been a kind of interior landscape, a way of being in the country that the country itself did not always permit in public. But in the mid-1970s, there was a new music arriving too, a pop music that sounded like the city's changing, like young people who had grown up between two worlds. And there was, below and behind all of it, the Islamic tradition, the recitation and the song that was not called music because officially within certain interpretations, music was complicated. But that was the most deeply felt sonic experience of the country, available in every mosque and every home and every childhood and every moment of grief and joy that had no other language. Mariam knew, in the way that people who pay attention know things before they can prove them, that something was building. She could not have said exactly what. She could not have named the shape of the thing that was coming. Neither could most people. When it arrived, it was simultaneously inevitable and impossible, the most predictable surprise in history. But the years we have been living in, these years of the mid-1970s, these years of morning tea and the bazaar and the rice fields at dusk and the garden in Karaj, these years are not years of premonition, mostly. They are years of ordinary life, lived with ordinary attention, by ordinary people who are fully, entirely, sometimes painfully alive. This is what I want you to hold. Not the history, not the event that is coming, not the revolution that will arrive in 1979 and change everything about the country's outward form while leaving intact, as such events usually do, the deep structures of human life, the way people love and eat and sing and raise their children and remember their dead and walk through the morning market with a woven bag and stop to smell a rose. I want you to hold this, the ordinary life. Mariam standing at the kitchen sink at 7 in the morning, watching the pomegranate tree in the courtyard come into bud. Shirin at the school bus stop, talking to her rabbit. Dariush walking along the paddy fields in the long light of a June evening. The women around the samanu pot stirring, the smell of it filling the kitchen, the sound of their voices, the bazaar in the morning, the smell of fresh bread and herbs, and the metallic cool of the old stone. The garden in May, the roses at their height, the sitar playing somewhere among the walnut trees. All of this was real. All of this happened. All of this was a life lived by actual people, in actual rooms, in an actual city that no longer exists in exactly this form, but that existed completely, fully, in all its detail and contradiction and beauty, in the years we have been visiting tonight. Chapter 20. The last summer before. It is the summer of 1978. Shirin is 11. She is at the age where she is aware that the world she lives in is not the only possible world, that the life she has is one of many lives, that the city she walks through every day is a city in a country, in a history that is, at this particular moment, loudly and insistently happening. She is old enough to have heard the conversations in lowered voices, old enough to have noticed the way adults look at each other at certain moments, the look that means we will not talk about this right now with the child here, old enough to know that this look means something serious. She is old enough, just barely, to be frightened. But Mariam does not want to talk about the fear tonight. Tonight, I want to tell you about the last ordinary summer. Because before everything changed, there was a last ordinary summer, and it was a good summer, and the people who lived it did not know it was the last of its kind, because that is how last things work. They do not announce themselves. They do not arrive wearing the label that retrospect will give them. They arrive as just another summer, another August, another evening in the courtyard with the fountain making its imperfect sound. That summer, Shirin learns to swim. Not for the first time. She has swum before, at the pool, at the sea. But this summer, she becomes a swimmer. There is a difference. She spends 2 weeks at the pool near Parisa's house on a family visit to the Caspian, and she works at it with the focused determination she brings to everything she decides to master. And by the end of the 2 weeks, she can cross the pool and back without stopping, her style still rough, but her endurance genuinely established. She comes out of the water each afternoon triumphant. Mariam watches her from the edge. She watches her daughter running through the shallow water, her wet hair plastered flat, her face entirely uninhabited by anything but the pleasure of what her body can do. This is one of the things Mariam keeps. That summer, Dariush records a singer. He has been trying to arrange this recording for 3 years. The singer is an old man from a village in the Zagros Mountains, a man who knows the full repertoire of his tradition, the songs of the Bakhtiari people, which are some of the most ancient secular songs in Iran, songs about migration and mountains and love and loss that have been sung for so long they have become part of the landscape itself. He gets the recording. The old man sings into Dariush's tape recorder in the main room of a house in a village that it took Dariush 2 days to reach by car, and then on foot. He sings for 3 hours. He sings a dozen songs, and then, after they have had tea and bread, and the old man has shown Dariush a photograph of his father, and told him a story about his father that is also one of the songs he sings two more. Dariush comes home from this trip different, not changed in any definitive way, not visibly, not loudly, but present in a different register, as if the recordings are in his body as well as on the tape. He plays some of them for Mariam that first evening back. They sit in the sitting room, the tape recorder between them on the low table, the old man's voice coming through the small speaker, thin and clear and ancient. Mariam sits very still. The voice is extraordinary. It is not what Western ears would call beautiful. It is not smooth, not polished. It has the roughness of a voice that has never been trained except by use, by 50 years of singing in places where the wind was part of the instrument. But it has something that trained voices do not always have. It has the quality of something that believes absolutely in what it is singing, the quality of transmission rather than performance. When it ends, Mariam sits for a moment in the silence the song leaves. She says, "You got it." He nods. He looks both satisfied and sad. Both things are appropriate. He got it. And getting it means the getting was necessary. It was necessary because the thing being gotten is fragile. It is in the hands of an old man in a village in the mountains. And what happens to it after that man is gone is not certain. They sit with this. Outside, the city makes its summer sounds. The fountain hiccups. The pomegranate tree is heavy with unripe fruit. Everything is as it has been. Everything is about to change. Chapter 21. Closing. You're very sleepy now. I can feel it, the weight of these chapters on you, the gentle accumulating gravity of all these stories, all these rooms, all these voices. Mariam is in her kitchen at 11 o'clock on a summer night in 1978, and she does not know what is coming. And she is just a woman in a kitchen, looking out at the courtyard, listening to the fountain. The fountain makes its small, imperfect sound. The pomegranate tree is dark against the night sky. Somewhere in the house, Shirin is asleep, one arm thrown over her head, Amir tucked against her side. Somewhere in the house, Dariush is asleep, his face turned toward the wall. The city breathes. Its millions of people are in their beds. The fabric merchant in the bazaar is asleep. The teacher, Kanom Malavi, is asleep. Farangis is asleep. Zore is asleep. The old man in the Zagros Mountains is asleep, his voice in the tape recorder, held there, waiting. Parisa is asleep, Nega beside her, Nega who is now 4 and has strong opinions about everything. The rice fields outside Rasht are dark and still. The garden in Karaj is closed for the night, the roses folded, the channel water moving slowly, quietly, in the dark. The mountains above Tehran are still. They have been still for 100,000 years, and they will be still for 100,000 more. And the city below them, this city of contradictions and beauty and noise and ordinary life, this city where people wake up every morning and make tea and go to work and worry about their children and argue about money and listen to music and feel, most of the time, in the middle of whatever else they feel, the low, steady warmth of being alive in a world that is imperfect and real and full of things worth paying attention to. This city is part of them now, as it is part of Mariam, as it is part of me, as it is now, after all these hours, a little part of you. Let it go. Let Tehran go, softly. The way you let a dream go in the morning. Not lost, not forgotten, but set down. Return to the place where stories live when they are not being told. Let Mariam's hand rest on the kitchen table. Let the fountain make its sound. Let the pomegranate tree stand in its corner. Let the city breathe. You are going to sleep now. A deep, full, restful sleep. The kind of sleep that comes after a long and beautiful journey. The kind that holds you like a warm room after a cold night. The kind that carries you through the dark hours into morning. Your breathing is slow. Your body is heavy. Your mind is soft and quiet, like water after rain. The mountains are watching over you. The jasmine on the street 3 houses from the corner is giving its smell to the morning air. The bread baker has his hands on the iron griddle, turning the bread with his bare hands, his face entirely absorbed. The women are gathering around the pot, the smell of samanu filling the kitchen. The sitar is playing somewhere among the walnut trees. The roses are at their height. The sea is flat and blue-grey and enormous and waiting. Sleep, sleep, sleep. Good night, Mariam. Good night, Shirin. Good night, Tehran. Good night.